For our very first review here on Back to Gaming, we have a look at the Mafia 2 Definitive Edition. The original is one of my favourite games of all time, but it's been 10 years since then. So does it still hold up well? And are the remastered graphics any good? And also, does it come with a few issues? So here we are, our very first ever review here on Back to Gaming. As always, thank you to our Patreon producers, Martin and Finley Samuels. And as always, you can help support Back to Gaming. Just search Back to Gaming on Patreon. Not only can you make the show get bigger and better and get loads of cool exclusive benefits for you, but you can also join in on the Patreon community as well. And as always, you can find us on social media, Back to Gaming Pods on Twitter and Back to Gaming Podcast on Instagram as well, and you can be part of the community on our social feeds. So for our first ever review, we're looking at Mafia 2 Definitive Edition. This is part of our Mafia Trilogy in Review series, which we announced just the other day on the Back to Gaming podcast. So I will be reviewing every single game that's included in the Mafia Trilogy. So obviously starting off with this one, Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, and I will be doing Mafia 3 Definitive Edition in the near future, and also the Mafia 1 remake, which is also known as, I believe, Mafia Definitive Edition, just after that game comes out on the 28th of August. And then what we'll do is we'll do a summary review of the Mafia Trilogy all put together, and we'll put parts of different reviews or mix all the reviews together of each game in the trilogy, and we'll have a definitive review for it with a finalized number out of 10. That's the way we're going to rate these games on this podcast, from 0 to, I feel like no game can get 0 though, unless it's really awful, up to 10. That's the highest score. It's not like Metacritic. I'm going to give it a 96 or a 63. It's not like that at all. So let's start off then with a Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, a spoiler-free review as well. No spoilers in this review. The original game, Mafia 2, came out nearly 10 years ago now, in 2010, and the original is one of my favourite games of all time. I just love that game so much. I love the story. I just loved everything about that. I mean, I got that game when I was a kid, and it was one of those games that I used to always talk about with my friends at school. We used to play it around each other's houses as well. It was just a big talking point at school around that time. First of all, the story of the game, you play as a guy called Vito Scaletta. When he's a kid, he moves to America, to a place called Empire Bay with his family. They were poor when they lived in Italy, and nothing really changes. They want to live that American dream, but they don't get that American dream. They're still very poor when they live in America. When he's a teenager, he meets a friend in school called Joe Barbaro. They become best friends, and they basically rob shops and steal from people, and they do crimes together. And then Vito, he gets caught, and he gets a choice either to go to jail or to go and fight in World War II. And he decides to go and fight in World War II, which sends him back to Italy, which is where the game starts. The very first mission is you fighting in World War II as Vito Scaletta. And then he ends up getting shot, so he goes on leave. He gets sent back to Empire Bay, where he meets up with Joe. And since he's last seen Joe has got involved with the Mafia, a family known as the Clemente family. And he manages to get Vito discharged from the service. And Vito, when he goes home, he finds out that since his father has died, he left behind loads of debt that his family's having to pay. So he gets pulled into the criminal underworld to pay off his father's debts. That's the initial story, and I believe that this story is just one of the best crime stories of all time. I just love it so much, and it does have some twists in the story, which is very, very interesting and good, especially in the final few chapters of the game. And I really like it. I'm not going to say anything else to spoil it, but I do honestly think it's one of the best crime stories that there has been in any game at all. I just feel so invested in Vito, and I feel as invested as I am in Vito's character playing the Definitive Edition than I did when I played the original game nearly 10 years ago. And And it's great to see the chemistry between him and his best friend Joe. And Joe brings humor to the game as well. And there's some missions that are just really funny, and there's some missions that are quite emotional as well. The writing is really good. It's a proper sort of, mob crime story, mafia story, which you expect it to be. I mean, it's a mafia game, but the writing is brilliant. The voice acting is brilliant as well. The only issue that I have with the writing is some NPCs do say the same lines over and over again. Whenever you get pulled over by the police, they'll say exactly the same thing. And sometimes in combat, some characters like Joe will say the same thing. Or if you're driving and you crash or something, or something like that, like you drive like my grandmother, or you shoot at my grandmother. It's just some of the same lines do get quite repetitive throughout the game. The way this game's structured, because it's like it's an open world and it's not. I mean, it's all structured in 15 chapters, and during these chapters you can essentially drive anywhere on the map, and there are some little bits you can do, like if you steal a car you can drop off at a certain place to get some money, but it's never sort of in your face as a side mission or a side quest. There's none of those in this. There's always a point of the map to go to. And so for me, it's not really that much of an open world. There's nothing to do. The city of Empire Bay doesn't really serve as an extra character. It's literally just a backdrop. The closest game I can compare this to in terms of its open world is LA Noire, where there's just not really anything to do in the open world aspect, the city itself, and it's mainly just narrative driven, driving to A to B, but you can go off the beaten track if you want to. That's how the game is structured, if you're interested in it. So you can probably tell from me explaining it is different to the likes of Saints Row, the third remastered that's just come out, or a GTA game. This is very narrative driven, and if you're looking for a brilliant world to explore, this definitely isn't the game for you. If you're into a really good crime story narrative, then I would recommend it for this story. I want to talk to you about the graphics though, because I mean, when you think of a remastered game, which is what this game is, you instantly think, well, the graphics, they must be good. I mean, that's the first thing you think, I believe, when you think of a remaster. And the graphics, to me, look a lot more better than what people have been saying online. When all of these leaks were coming out, there was all these leaked videos, and there was people saying that this game doesn't look very good at all. It looks really ugly. It looks a lot more better than it does in the videos. And I'm really glad, though, that Saints Row the Third Remastered also came out on the same week, because that's another game I'll be reviewing separately. It'll be my next review. But both of those games, they came out within a year from each other. Saints Row the Third came out in 2011 originally, and obviously Mafia 2 in 2010. So they came out around the same time. And looking at the graphics between the two games, Saints Row the Third Remastered looks so much better. It seems like every little thing has been touched up. Most of the games have been touched up. Pretty much in every aspect, that game looks better compared to Mafia 2. Now, there is some leeway here in a sense that I believe, because Saints Row the Third Remastered was made by a different studio, not Volition, whereas with the Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, it was made by Hangar 13, who are also very busy at the moment, obviously making the Mafia 1 remake, which most of the team will be working on at the moment. But the graphics, they don't look amazing. They're definitely not as good as other remaster games that have come out recently, like Saints Row the Third Remastered, and it's not up to scratch, I don't think, with games that have come out within the last year or so. You won't be blown away by these graphics, but it is definitely an improvement from the original. I played this game on the Xbox One X, so I got the 4K and HDR resolution, although some of the colours in the game do look washed out, especially the snowy parts of the game. First few hours is all snow, and I feel like the snow really does not do the game justice very well. It just makes the game look a bit, the colours just don't look that nice. It's not very vibrant. A few hours into the game, though, all of that snow goes away and it's sunny and it's nice, and the game looks a lot more nicer then. Building textures look a lot nicer and look a lot better. I feel like most textures have actually been touched up or redone. There are some textures, though, that still don't look very good, like food textures or certain textures of buildings, like maybe furniture or objects that you see in alleyways when you're going around the world of the city. Those sort of textures don't look very good. And the other thing is the character models. You can definitely see that Vito's character model has been improved on, and some other main characters that do play a big role into the story arc and the story of the game. But some side characters and some NPCs or characters that come up in missions do look really ugly, and it looks like the character models just do not look improved at all. It really can put you off quite a bit at how ugly that those character models look. One thing that I did like, though, was that when you explore the world, the world does feel alive. Although the city is a backdrop, there's not really anything to do. It feels like every NPC who's walking around is scripted individually, and they've got their own thing that they're doing. They don't seem all the same. You don't feel like you're seeing the same person walking down every single street you come across in the game. The city does feel alive to a certain extent, but it doesn't feel massively alive to the point where, there's loads to do, you're interacting with loads of people. The gameplay of the game is good, but compared to other games now, it's not as good. It's not aged the best, I don't think. I mean, the combat is just fine. It doesn't sort of blow you away. I can't say that I was disappointed with it or happy with it. It was just fine. I mean, when you look at sort of shooting and stuff compared to more, more modern games, it's just, I don't know, it just seems just fine, really. The combat won't blow you away. There's none of these sort of interesting mechanics in the game. This original game came out at a time where cover shooting was a big thing. So a lot of it, you're taking cover and you're shooting, and it does feel like you just stick to the walls in this game. But I just, as I said, I wasn't underwhelmed through the combat. I just thought it was fine. It's like the hand-to-hand combat. Very basic. Hold this button to dodge and then spam this button. And when you look at that combat compared to obviously games like Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, it hasn't aged massively. I don't think it's not aged the best. The driving, though, I really do enjoy this game. I do feel like some people don't like the driving, though, in Mafia 2. I like it because it's set in the 1940s and in the 50s, and you're driving very old cars. And what I like about it is, the cars in the 1940s are very bulky, and when you're driving, you can literally feel the weight and the bulk of that car. Some people hate it. I personally like it. It makes the game more immersive for me. And then when you're in the 50s and you're driving more convertible cars, the cars feel a lot more like GTA. And I really like the whole driving mechanics in this game. I think it's as impressive as it was when the original game did come out. And I do find the game very immersive, apart from the issues that I've already mentioned about character models and some things just looking a little bit off with the textures. The reason why I find it quite immersive is because of the realism of this game. I mean, for example, your car can run out of fuel and you've got to fill it up at the petrol station, or you can get caught by the cops for speeding or holding a firearm in public and you've got to pay a fine or you've got to bribe them. I do really like that aspect of the game, and I also really like the whole wanted mechanic. It's not just drive away from the police and then when they can't find you for a few seconds, that's it, you're out of harm's way from the police. There's such a thrill when it comes to hiding from the cops, because, for example, if you do a heist, you rob a store and it all goes wrong or something, and they see you physically, the police officers, then they will notice you whenever they see you. You have to change your clothes before they stop recognizing you, which means you've got to sneak all the way back to your house to then get dressed, and then you're okay. But then they might actually see you get into a car that you just stolen to get away. So not only they've seen you in your clothes, they've then seen the car that you've got into, and the way to stop them for seeing you in that car is to change the number plate. So I really like that whole wanted level mechanic. It's really good, and it is really immersive. It does feel very realistic. The UI in the game, I don't like very much. I don't think it really sort of it doesn't really, it's not aged that much compared to obviously modern games, and that's, you know, what we're finding quite a lot with this game. So for example, you'd be walking and you've got to go to like the bright flashing door, and although I do find this game very immersive to an extent, that does kind of pull you out of that immersion when you just see a bright flashing door and it's like, go here. It's very gamey. And what I have noticed is that although quite a lot of some UI bits I feel like have been taken out of the main story, the DLC in this game is very different to the main campaign. It's very arcadey. So there's Jimmy's Vendetta, the Betrayal of Jimmy. Those are two expansions that are not canon with the game's story at all. You play as a completely different character called Jimmy, and the game's more of an open world, and it's more GTA style. You go around to different missions on the map and then you do those missions, but there's not really any cutscenes. You just read some text of the mission you need to do, and it's like, rob, shoot up these two stores or something like that. But what I mean in terms of UI in this DLC, and more particularly with the Joe's Adventures DLC, which is canon, it's where you play as Vito's best friend called Joe. It's like, for example, there's a mission where you've got to chase this car, and when you chase this car, the car that you're chasing has a massive green arrow pointing right at it, and it just feels it's just not immersive at all. It's just, you know, that it's not aged well. It just reminds me of like Simpsons Hit and Run, which was a great game, but when you chase a car, it's like the bright arrow that's pointing at that car. Go get that car. It just, I didn't like that. The UI in this game very much at all. Now, the issues that I have with this game, because as I said at the start, this game does have a lot of issues, which is true. First of all, the AI in missions when you're fighting, whether that be gang members or the police, the AI is not good at all. It feels basic. It's just they run, they look at you, they stand there, they shoot. You know, there's nothing more to that really at all. But there are some glitches and hitches here with the AI, which isn't good. So, for example, there was one mission where I was meant to be having a gunfight, which was on this rooftop, and none of the police came. Like, two policemen came, I shot them, and all of the other police officers that were meant to be all over this rooftop trying to kill me were stuck in the building. They hadn't gone through the door. And then you walk up to the door, and because it's third person, you can peek around the corner and have a look with the camera angle, and they're just stood there, frozen, not doing anything. As soon as you step through that door, they all start shooting at you at the same time, and then you're losing so much health, and if you're playing on a harder difficulty, it's just impossible to survive that moment. So the AI isn't very good at all, and I remember it being better in the original game, which is weird. I don't remember any of these issues being in the original game at all. Another bug that I found was when I was driving in one mission to drop off a character somewhere. When I went to brake, instead the car accelerated really fast, and I ended up driving into a wall and crashing and losing health. Another issue that I found, which has been a massive problem, is the frame rate issues in this game. I mentioned the graphics earlier. One thing that I didn't mention was the lighting, because they have added more lighting to that game, and it does look nice, but it comes at a cost, and I think it comes at a cost with the frame rate. Because, for example, when you're driving through this tunnel on this highway, on this motorway, there's so many lights in this tunnel that it's just a whole bright light, this tunnel, as you're driving through it, and the frame rate drops dramatically. It's really not good at all. And then there was one area of the game as well where I was at for a mission. I was driving through to drive home from this mission location. And as I was driving home, all of the lights at nighttime, it made the whole game look like fog all around you. It didn't really look like lights. And because all of this lighting, it made the frame rate just drop again dramatically, but to the point where you were literally going I'd say under 10 frames a second. You were going so slow, and it made the game completely unplayable. I had to restart the whole game. Another thing that I noticed that did spoil the experience for me was some eyes in cutscenes do look really odd. Now, this did only actually happen once that I noticed. I've seen other people having the same issues. But the eyes look really lazy, or they just spin around in people's eyes. And this instance was at the final cutscene of the game, the ending of Mafia 2, that for me, it is so good, and it's spoiled that moment for me when I loved it in the original. It was ruined for me in the definitive edition because there's a certain character who you're interacting with and his eyes are all over the place. Then, as I remember, actually, it just reminded me there was another issue a little bit earlier on with one cutscene where it had a Assassin's Creed Unity issue. Now, you know me, I'm not in the games industry. I don't know all these terms for all these issues, but it was like their face disappeared and you could just see their teeth and eyes in one of the cutscenes. It was really weird. There's definitely a lot of issues with this game, and final issue that I noticed was with the sound. First of all, because I've not really mentioned the sound. The sound, all of the sound is good. I thought it's got really good sound in this game, that it adds a lot of atmosphere. For example, cutscenes and the background noise is really nice. The fact that you can turn on the jukebox before you go into a cutscene, the same song's playing. The sound all around, the sound of the guns, I thought was good. But there was one issue when playing the game with headphones. In the cutscenes, one of the cutscenes only play out of one ear, which is really weird. It's like left-legged. It's really, really strange that only comes out with one ear. And again, if you're playing with headphones, that can affect the immersion for you a little bit. I do feel like this game needed a lot more time in the oven before it was released. I mean, playing this game does not feel like the definitive edition to me. The original definitely plays a lot more better from what I remember than the definitive edition. I've heard that it's worse to play at the moment on the PS4 Pro. The Xbox One X is meant to be the best on console. PC is meant to be the best anywhere, but I have had a lot of issues playing on the Xbox One X. I do feel like they could have, I don't know, put a little bit more, expanded on the game a little bit just to make it seem, I don't know, a little bit more modern, not as dated. Maybe some side missions, even if it's just kind of just more simplistic stuff that's in the in the DLC. And maybe they could have added more animations like interaction around your houses, or maybe drive-by shooting, so you could actually shoot out of the car window a car that you're chasing. Just little tiny bits could have improved this remaster, this definitive edition, just a little bit. But I do appreciate that Hangar 13 are doing a lot of work making the Mafia 1 remake, but I definitely do feel that this game needed a lot more time in the oven. I mean, it's very buggy at the moment. There's a lot of technical issues with this game, the worst one being the frame rate. I really hope that they do fix these issues as soon as possible. And at the state that this game is in at the moment, I've got to give this a 6 out of 10. I feel awful giving Mafia 2 a 6 out of 10, but the main issue is just the technical difficulties, the technical issues with this game. It just sort of bogs down the whole game. It doesn't make it as fun as it was to play the original game. You know, the frame rate issues, the weird eyes in cutscenes, and those are the main issues that for me just spoil the game for me. And the fact that it's just not aged too well. I mean, when you play the combat now, it feels very simplistic, it's very spammy. The AI as well, those issues is one of the things that comes into giving this game a 6 out of 10, with the AI just not being good at all and just freezing at random points in the game, so you can't progress a mission because the AI has just frozen behind some door that you've now got to go to and try and kill all that AI. It's just, there's a lot of issues with this, and I feel like what they should have done is held off on putting the Mafia 2 Definitive Edition out now. I feel like they should just waited for the Mafia 1 remake and just released them all at the same time, because this experience for me definitely wasn't as good as the original, and I did come away disappointed at the game due to the technical difficulties that it does have. So hopefully they can patch this and it does fix the game. These patches fix the game very soon. If you're on PC, you can upgrade to this game for free if you already own it, and I have heard that that's the best place to play. There doesn't seem to be many issues on the PC, so maybe if you're a PC gamer, then I don't recommend it to you because I haven't played the PC version, but it seems to be a lot more better. But right now, I would say wait on this until there are some patches. And what I'll do is I'll continue to cover this game. I'll see if there's any patches that are released. And although I've given it a 6 out of 10, it doesn't mean that Mafia Trilogy as a whole is going to be bad. I mean, Mafia 3 Definitive Edition, that could be good, although it is just a re-release of the original Mafia 3. But the Mafia 1 remake as well where a lot of attention is going. And I really do think that if Mafia 1 Remake is really good and they're doing what they're saying that they're doing and it's going to be pulled off really well, then there is a chance that the Mafia trilogy may be worth it just for the remake and the story with everything bundled in. So it's sad to give this a 6 out of 10. The story is the best part of this game. It's incredible, but the outdated gameplay mechanics and the really annoying technical difficulties mean that the final score for the Mafia 2 Definitive Edition is a 6 out of 10. Thank you so much for listening to our very first review here on Back to Gaming. It's all thanks to our Patreon, people on Patreon. So if you want more content like this, do support us on Patreon. Just search Back to Gaming. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you again soon.